the ball issue which happened on match point last night. So, Matt, have you had a chance to look at all of what has happened?
Yeah, I feel like if you're on any form of tennis social media, it's kind of hard to avoid this at the moment. But yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, I think
Yeah.
I'd like to think.
Just quickly before we get into it, just for anyone who hasn't seen it or is been living under a rock for the past 10 hours or so, the point or issue in question came on match point for Jack Draper. So this is a match between the Brit of Jack Draper, the British number one, and versus the Canadian number one, Felix Auger-Aliassime. It was the third round match last night. I think it's the second to last match that took place on Grandstand Arena. Jack was serving 40-30 to see out the match and to get himself into the quarterfinals. And in the process, did a quite brilliant or usual Jack Draper serve out wide. Felix got the ball back with good purchase, and the ball came low to Jack's feet. But the issue came in terms of how Jack got it over the net. The lines umpire, and generally on the first viewing, when it comes to no slow-mo shots, just made it look like Jack was able to sort of pick it up from the balls of his from the bottom of his racket, and it just clipped the top of the net and skidded over. And as such, that's what the umpire saw and of course called game, set, and match Draper. However, on closer inspection, and Felix, from the eyesight that he saw the ball, what looked like the ball ended up hitting his racket, bouncing on the ground, and bouncing over the net. And of course, under those circumstances, the point would go to Felix because he was unable to, because Draper was able to control the ball and get it onto the opponent's side of the net. So yeah, go on, Matt, carry on.
Yeah, I mean, everything you said is kind of what happened. It's just I think these things happen. Like, people make mistakes. I think people are people. You can't get everything right every single time. I do think some of this conversation about this topic is relevant to the fact that this particular umpire has been involved in a few controversial moments as of late. But I do also think it's kind of brought up the issue again of video replays, which of course we will see at the US Open. And had there been a video replay there would have been, the issue would have been sorted there and then, and they would have, well, Felix would have got the point and it would have gone to juice. I mean, people are criticizing Draper, and I can understand that people think that he knew what happened, but he did offer to replay the point had there been a replay. But it's a tricky one. I don't know what your take on it is.
Yeah, it's, for me, certainly there's two sides to that. I think the general consensus that I think everybody has come to across, tennis Twitter and other forms of medium as well, is that there needs to be video review technology used by line umpires. And as you say, if this happened in 2 weeks' time on Louis Armstrong, and it was the same line umpire and whatnot, he would have then been given a tablet which would have showed what had happened. And then he would have been able to have made a correct, hopefully would have been a correct call at that point, which would have been, at worst, probably for Draper would have been for him to have lost the point, but probably maybe a replay of the point or something like that to have taken place, because the way that point played out should have been allowed to win the match, it's just ridiculous in 2024 that we as fans can watch all these points play out, and slow-mos and all those camera shots and whatnot, and see what has taken place. Yet the line umpire is unable to use that data or unable to use that evidence to help make an informed decision in what they're doing going forward. And it's something that, certainly I hope the ATP will look to change. They'll probably be, I suspect a lot of them will be holding out to see how it goes at the US Open and to see if it works before trying to then implement it. I mean, I know there'll be technicalities around the fact of, is it financially affordable to them for smaller tournaments at 250 level to have such technology? And then there'll be those sort of questions that need to take place, but certainly some sort of rollout, certainly a big event like a Masters event. I mean, these are the biggest events on the tour for the ATP, and they don't particularly want any controversy around fairness to almost cloud their event there. But I think, as you say, I think the next issue is around, do we think that Draper knew about it? For me, I know people will disagree, but I certainly believe that he probably didn't know much what was happening. You could see with his eyesight that he was looking solely at the other side of the net. And with how low the ball that he felt he got the ball, you probably at that stage don't really know the difference between what is on your or what is on the ground, almost like how low you are, and if you feel as though you've got the ball fully up or if it's away. So for him to say, and it was key to point out that he said he would be happy to replay it, but the umpire said no. I believe the point was valid, and that, as such, this match is now ending. Is that key bit there?
Yeah, and I think that's it. And it's just, everything's been heightened by when this incident came on match point. Had it been earlier on in the set, maybe it wouldn't have got as much reaction, but just the timing of it has made it into this big media storm and has created a big topic of conversation.
And as we can of course see from the tweet just down to the right of me, players have given their opinion. So the first person we've got here is Stefanos Tsitsipas. Maybe a little bit salty by the pure fact that Steph was serving for the match against Draper in the previous round and then got broken to love after a little bit of a disagreement, is better to describe it, with the umpire. It seems Draper's getting involved in a lot of matches where umpires seem to be causing a bit of controversy. I don't necessarily think, though, in Steph's situation there wasn't any controversy. He did break the serve rules during that match. But he certainly commented on it. We've got Renee Stubbs, somebody else who suggests that Jack knew, and he says it is a player you should absolutely know if the balls end up hitting the ground and bouncing over or not. And of course, other players like Shapovalov and Kyrgios have also come in certainly with their statements talking about more the line umpire than the player, but certainly giving their 2 pence worth into the fray, and it's turned out that Jack Draper, a player who, to British tennis fans may have known a little bit more about him, has somehow been sort of shoved onto the world stage for being in such a controversial manner. And as as John's saying in the chat while talking tennis account, it is I do feel sorry for the umpire. He's making a lot of very stressful decisions in front of. Certainly with the Grandstand Arena, that's a court that's certainly around about 6,000, 7,000 people. When it comes to that, and you can see very much where the umpire was sat. The ball was behind Draper, or at least Draper's body was able to obscure a lot of the sight of what was happening. And we had to be careful here because being a line umpire is a very stressful job. That it's we need to make sure that we're able to get a lot of people in to go and see. I know that. A couple in the chat that some people like to have a go at umpires, but I feel as though we need to make sure that he made a decision. It was wrong, and humans do make mistakes, and unfortunately in this situation it was quite a big mistake that did affect. Well, I say it certainly affected that part of the match where it ended it. I mean, the main thing is that even if FAA won that point, even if FAA did win that point, it would have only gone to juice. And given the way that the match was going, you would still have favoured Draper to at least served it out and to have seen out the match from that point there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things. I think in the long term, it's not that big of a deal, but it just feels like everything right now because of it's the recency of it, and like I said, the umpire involved. I think that has definitely raised the stakes of it. But yeah, he definitely doesn't perhaps deserve some of the criticism he's getting just personally, because obviously social media can be quite a brutal place.
It can certainly be a brutal place, and it's a shame. It's a shame really that the match had to end like that, because it was actually a really good match. I felt. I mean, I rewatched it back this morning. Just because, rewatched it back this morning, and Draper played unbelievably well. Certainly in those second and third sets. Certainly to be able to live with the power that FAA was putting forward, and I'm sure FAA will be. FAA brought a great game as well, especially given the fact that he came off a win earlier in the day, beating Ruud in quite comfortable fashion. But it's masked certainly for Draper a really impressive result. he hasn't necessarily had the best runs at Masters events this year. He's barely got out of the round of 64, or hasn't got out of the round of 64 at all coming into this tournament. Now's got himself into the quarterfinals, which is fantastic, and is really putting together a fantastic run, given the fact he's got 4th round points to defend at the US Open coming up, to really ensure he's got some form. And given the side of the draw that he's in, a potential run to the final is not out of the question. He's playing Runo later on, who you expect him to be able to at least match up fairly well with. And then maybe a matchup, okay, granted, Hurkacz has had his number a couple of times this year already, but it could be Hurkacz or it could be Tiafoe. And Tiafoe is the person who he's just beat, who he beat on the route to the Stuttgart title. So, it's a shame really that Draper's, a moment in the starlight almost just before the US Open to really make a name for himself, to make him a player for people to watch, has been masked by this incident.
Yeah, and that's it. It'll be interesting to see how he reacts to that, like later today against Rune, because if he could really be affected by what's happened last night, he would probably know some of the reaction, and it'd be interesting to see if it bothers him against Rune.